Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to follow Darcy once more. Let's see what's up with her, and let's see what comes out of my face, if anything at all, that will be of interest to you all. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I am a licensed therapist, and I'm also a professor. I focus a lot of my career on couples therapy, and so whenever I watch these shows, I have a lot to say. Let's see what happens here.
If it happens to be that, he proposes at the end of the trip, great. Maybe Tom was the one all along. I want you to get hurt again. It's not going to be the same situation like it was with Jessie.
So that was great of her twin sister, Stacy, to say. If you're ever in that situation, that's one of the better things to say. It's just like, I don't want to see you get hurt again. It worries me that you're going to get hurt again. Rather than saying things like, what's wrong with you? Or what's wrong with this guy? And I think this guy is a piece of S. Instead, just talk from your own feelings. I'm worried about you. I don't know if it's justified, but I'm worried about you. And to see Darcy have what I would label as a disappointing, dysfunctional response of everything's going to be fine is just not realistic. Because now, it's not because Darcy's stupid, because she's not. What the reason is because, like I said earlier, there's a desperation that is there, that she feels like, I need to cut myself off from certain data that, is pessimistic or leads to this not working out. My cat wants to chime in on the podcast now. I think she wants out of my office. I better let her out. Hold on a second.
Sometimes I just wish I moved on sooner from him. I feel like I wasted too much energy on it. After the breakup, he wanted to kind of come to Connecticut and go to mediation and all this. He was calling me all summer long. I never wanted that relationship back. Why would he even want to book a flight to Connecticut and mediate it? Why would he even say that?
Very interesting. So even after the second season, where they had broken up several times and had that tell-all episode where it was very explosive, he was still contacting her, wanting to mediate. I don't know what that means, mediate. That usually means something else. I suspect what he was asking for was for therapy, couples therapy, or some version of that. That is very interesting and points to the conclusion or the conceptualization. Again, I have no idea because it's just the data that they're giving me, that he has deep attachment injuries that relate to the kind of fusion that we saw the two of them exhibiting. Both of them wanted to be in the relationship desperately, and a lot of their attachment injuries, speculation, led to triggering each other. But underneath that all was a deep affection and warmth for each other, which stands in sharp contrast to the behavior we saw from him. It might be confusing to some of you out there. It's like, how could you be so controlling and so mean and so hostile, and also be having all these, at least behavioral chasing of her? Why would he continue to come back? Again, one narrative that a lot of people have is, well, he's evil and he wants to control someone. And that's one way of looking at it. And it's not inherently untrue for people like that to do that sort of thing. Again, I can't diagnose Jessie, I have no idea. But for people who control, that's one narrative that you can have. But I think a more accurate, more common, accurate conceptualization that I have found, which is that he desperately wanted closeness like anyone else. He fell in love with her like anyone else might. And when he was triggered in terms of his attachment injuries, he had defenses that he had developed early in life, or maybe he learned from his family that he exhibited, which resulted in being hostile, controlling, and very mean and very hyper reactive to the situations. Does that mean they're going to get back together this season? Oh God.
But we want healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
And you deserve better. So that's
I know that now. I'm actually regressing back there. It's very emotional. What the torment I had gone through.
Totally agree. You didn't deserve that. No one deserves to be treated like that. Absolutely. And I think that it's quite likely that she has been traumatized, and maybe even the girls as well, by that whole situation. That she has I've been talking about therapy for healing, about past attachment injuries of which we don't know, but I would speculate happened. We would also expect that she would need a lot of time to grieve and to heal from the attachment injuries that relationship incurred on her. I'll also say that it was probably traumatic for Jessie as well. And I know a lot of you out there don't like it when I say things like that about Jessie, because maybe for you, you've been traumatized by someone who resembles Jessie to you. But I am a therapist, and I treat the Darcys of the world and the Jessies of the world. And I have treated the Jessies of the world, and I have seen their soft underbelly. I have seen their attachment injuries, and I have seen why they do those aggressive, mean things. I've seen, and really a lot of people do aggressive, mean things. So it's not uncommon for someone to do that. And I have treated people like that. And in order to treat them, I have to understand them. And I also have to have unconditional positive regard. I have to believe in them. I can dislike their behavior. I can label their behavior. I've called clients before abusive. I've said, what you're doing right there is abusive. But only after I had a very strong relationship with them that they could trust me with saying something like that. Maybe years of therapy before I could say something like that without the relationship rupture ending the therapy and having them terminate with me. All of these individuals are being traumatized by the relationship. We might be able to sympathize or empathize more with Darcy, but I'll tell you, for me, I empathize with Jessie as well. I hate to trigger some people when I say stuff like that, but I feel like things like that need to be said, because for every Darcy in the world, there's a Jessie in the world. And maybe some Jessies are watching right now. For those of you who identify with the Darcys of the world, you deserve me to tell you that you have worth and that therapy can be a good thing for you. But you Jessies out there also deserve me to say that as well, that I understand where you come from and there's hope for you, and you can have secure relationships. You can heal from the past so that you don't have narratives of superiority or aggression or defensive aggression or mean behavior that pushes people away, misinterpretations of other people's behavior. You deserve to heal from that as well. Everyone deserves that healing. Everyone around the world deserves that healing. And so I'm rambling, but let's see what happens next.
Very bad. And I am strong. I'm not gonna let any man take me down.
Open your heart, that's fine. Just take it slow and just enjoy yourself.
I will, trust me.
Yeah.
Trust me this time.
I keep harping on this, but Darcy, yes, never let that happen again. You do not deserve to be treated badly. 100%, 1,000,000,000% yes. And you are doing things that are, red flags of this happening again. You're already getting defensive about Tom. People are pointing out, hey, slow down. Remember what happened last time? Oh, no, this time it's different. And there's nothing wrong with optimism, but there is something concerning to your well-being of the defensive structure that leads you to be overly optimistic and excusing people before they make mistakes. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, let's move on.
I really feel connected to Tom, but my biggest fear is that Tom would be a Jessie in disguise. I'm not gonna be stupid this time around.
Okay, so good. Now, what's the definition of not being stupid? One definition of not being stupid is to put up boundaries and say, no, you can't do that to me, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with boundaries. But another definition of not being stupid is recognizing each other's attachment injuries and attachment bids and addressing them as attachment bids rather than being triggered or triggering each other. Because I could see a scenario with Tom. I mean, undoubtedly Tom has attachment injuries because everyone does. But I could see her saying, I'm not going to have this happen again. And by saying that and only that will lead to her triggering Tom, which triggers his issues, which cause him to be a jerk, which cause her to, do things that trigger him, and back and forth. And then the whole thing happens all over again. And everyone walks away going like, Darcy is a victim and all these other guys are assholes. Rather than, well, let's look at our attachment injuries and let's try to take care of each other. Do people have a knee-jerk reaction sometimes to be a jerk? Yes. But how do we prevent that from happening before it gets there? So we'll see what happens.
When you pick me up at the airport, what's it gonna be like? Can I jump in your arms? Are you gonna give me a big kiss?
I'm going to send you a driver to come and pick you up and bring you to where I am after a flight to the UK, having not brushed your teeth. I think it would be preferable to give the time you need to deal with whatever you need to deal with.
Very nice of you, actually. I like that better.
You should.
This could just be me reading into things because I'm worried about Darcy, but there's some yellow flags there of more controlling behavior, honestly, of someone who has a style of resorting to superiority and control because of their attachment injuries, as exhibited by Darcy's like, so what are we going to do at the airport? Am I going to run into your arms, or what's the deal here? And he's like, well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to have a driver pick you up. You're going to go to blah, blah, blah. Instead of him saying, well, Darcy, what do you want? Because I have my preferences. I want you to be happy, and I want to be happy. So what do you want? Now, maybe Darcy really likes that gesture of him taking control, but this is actually something that comes to mind too, is a lot of times, people out there listening, you may have been in relationships repeatedly where someone eventually exhibited a behavior that you didn't like, whether it be control or withdrawal or cheating on you or even sexually abusing your kids. That's a pattern too of mate selection. And you're wondering, why am I repeatedly connecting with this sort of person? People around me are saying these guys are kind of rare, these women are kind of rare, but I seem to be, hitting 1,000 here. That's a baseball term, American baseball. The speculation, it's hard to know, but it certainly stands to reason, and I found this to be at least anecdotally true, that, and listen to my past episode where I talked about projective identification, we have a need to find certain kinds of people that are unknown to our conscious mind for reasons of defensive projective identification, trying to recreate relationships that are unresolved from the past. And so our subconscious will pick up on little things that will slip past our conscious mind. So it's possible that right now, Darcy's unconscious mind is picking up on, ooh, he's kind of controlling because he didn't ask me what I wanted at the airport. He just told me what I was going to do. Now, her subconscious is saying, yes, we need him because he is going to eventually escalate that behavior, and then I'm going to be able to project onto him something that I'm trying to recreate from my past. But our conscious mind might interpret it, and our unconscious mind makes sure that our conscious mind interprets it this way of, well, it's so romantic that he's taking control. It means that he really cares about me. You'll see other kinds of behavior like in the controlling realm where a woman, while she's dating, will say, I don't want a controlling guy again. But then a guy comes to the door and is very complimentary and opens the door for her, doesn't let her pay for dinner, tells her, all showering her with gifts, and never asks for anything in return, is never vulnerable about his own emotions, is very gallant in the classic sense. And to the subconscious mind, it's like, yes, he has all the markers of a controlling person because he's not talking about his feelings. He's not vulnerable. He's not really asking me what I want. We're not engaging in a egalitarian conversation of between two adults about what things are supposed to look like for our relationship. So yes, good. He has the markers of a future controlling person. But the conscious mind is like, oh, it's so romantic. It's so great to have someone who cares about me. It's so great to have someone who has that, chivalry involved. Now, there's nothing wrong with being chivalrous. There's nothing wrong with two people. Like if me and my wife have the sort of relationship where I open the door for her, which I try to do sometimes, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, what are the overall messages around that, and where is this headed? And what's the absence of things? So if you're one of those people, for example, one of the things you want to look for is not romantic gestures, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But how much egalitarian talk is there? How much checking in with each other is there? So let's monitor as time goes on between Tom and Darcy, how much Darcy and Tom really talk about what they want and negotiate that at that level before resorting to Tom being very romantic and taking control in a way that she likes, in a way that she won't like in the future.
Tom sent me this beautiful ring, and he was so sweet. He posted it up on social media. After Tom posted the photo of me wearing the ring on Instagram, Jesse decided to involve himself. I guess he was trying to say we were faking the relationship and it's like a fake engagement. But first of all, we never even said we're engaged. Tom bought me a beautiful ring that I love wearing because he knows my style.
Again, total speculation based on the information that producers have decided to show us, but I'm guessing Jesse, deep down, is really hurt by seeing his love, someone he has some attachment to, dating online. Given the fact that I'm guessing all three of these individuals are fairly out there on social media in terms of their personal lives, I could see how that could be very triggering. If you're one of those people who has been triggered in terms of your attachment injury, seeing an ex-partner dating online, you know how that feels. Now, you might not be able to sympathize with Jesse given your feelings about him, but that's the way I would interpret that. Now, that doesn't mean you blast people online saying that they're in a fake engagement, but it's that secondary emotion of anger that is a reaction to the primary emotion of hurt.
Let's not talk about Jessie so much, you know? It is what it is.
I am over the Jesse relationship. I just don't. I feel like sometimes it has to come up, but I can't keep talking about my ex-boyfriend forever. I'm working on that. I don't want to dwell on the past. I want to move forward and focus on us.
So along those lines, I hear this a lot from people. Get over it. How do I, people email me, how do I let go? How do I get over it? There's no such thing as letting go. There's no such thing as getting over it. Contrary to the Frozen song, we can't just let go of something. Now, you know, what do we mean by let go? But typically the way people mean let go or getting over is I'm thinking about this person. I have this compulsion to talk about this person. I have dreams about them. When I see them on social media, it really gets me emotionally, and I need to talk about it. And I don't want to do that anymore. So how do I let go? How do I get over it? It's not possible. Let me give you another example that may be more relatable. Let's say both of your parents die in a tragic car accident, and the next day the police come to your door and say your parents are dead because of a tragic car accident. A drunk driver hit them and killed them. Well, let's say in 6 months you want to talk about that. You want to think about it. You have feelings about it. When you see pictures of your parents, you cry or you think about them. You want to go to their grave. You have a lot of mixed feelings about the drunk driver who hit them. So 6 months later, I think most of us hopefully would acknowledge that that's normal, that you still have feelings, you want to talk about it, you're still processing the emotions, the grief process is still happening. You haven't resolved the issue. Your body needs to go through a lot of the emotional processes to feel like it's really able to express itself. And most of us would agree that you wouldn't ask someone to let go. You wouldn't ask someone to get over it at that point. Well, breakups are the same. You know, barring some scale from like your parents getting run over by a drunk driver on one end and some smaller loss on the other end. Who knows, everyone reacts differently to these sorts of things. But when we lose partners, even if we're happy to see them go, as Darcy is, there are feelings, there's grief. Even just when you quit a job that you didn't like, there can be loss feelings and grief feelings. The body doesn't react to our control. When the body wants to grieve, then the body's going to grieve. And regardless of how inconvenient it might be to your conscious mind, your body needs to do that. And our culture, at least here in the United States, downplays all of that and is like, oh, get over it, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and blah, blah, blah. And it's really destructive. So what I would say to Darcy and everyone else is, it sounds like you're grieving. It sounds like you have a need to feel the feelings, to talk about this past relationship. So maybe it's not with Tom. Maybe you don't want to talk about Jessie with Tom, but clearly you have a lot on your chest. People will go through breakups like this in therapy, and for 3 years, they basically say the same thing to me over and over and over again. And at no point am I thinking, why aren't they getting over it? Why aren't they letting go of this? Why do they keep saying the same thing? The reason is because when we go through losses, there's a normal process of needing to voice it. You know, if you've ever been through a breakup, or if you're going through one right now, you might find yourself saying the exact, or at least very similar thing to a set of people who are willing to listen. And think of it as, the way I explain it to people is, think of it as you have X amount of grief points that you have to spend in order to, you know, to have it resolve. So let's say you have 10,000 grief points. Let's say Darcy has 10,000 grief points that she has to spend because of the emotionality or the feeling she has around the loss of Jessie. And it's not just the loss of Jessie, it's also the loss of a future with Jessie. It's the loss of her own self-esteem and self-worth around what happened. You know, who knows what other losses she has as a result. And she has to spend those 10,000 points. And every time she talks about it with a friend, then she spends a little bit more of those points. Every time she cries about it, she spends a little bit more of those points. Every time she goes to therapy, every time she looks at pictures online and gets angry and, you know, throws her phone on the ground, she's spending a little bit more points. And eventually, after you spend a sufficient amount of points, then you feel more resolved. But the grief never ends with significant losses. The grief never ends. People will say, it's been 3 years, you're still thinking about this past boyfriend that you dated for a year. It's been 3 years. You should be over it. No. That the body does what it needs to do. If it needs to still be grieving after 3 years, then it needs to be doing that. Now, some of you might be thinking things like, well, at what point do you just need to tell someone, look, you need to stop thinking about this? So there's some slight validity to that. But 9 times out of 10, maybe even 99 times out of 100, it's just what the body needs to do. Every once in a while, you'll have someone that quote unquote holds on to grief for some other reason, like they just want people's attention or something like that. But that is very rare. In fact, there's a chance that you out there have never encountered that in your life. It's very rare. So it can happen, but it's extremely rare. And I find as a therapist, when I give people space to really talk about it, it does peter out after a while because the body eventually spends those points, processes the feelings, gains meaning. That's another thing that we do after loss is we will gain meaning from the situation. That's usually the end result is acceptance / meaning making and post-traumatic growth. There's like with Darcy, part of her meaning making that is part of her, you know, the good part of her grief process is that she's looking at her past relationship with Jessie and she's saying, I'm not going to let that happen again. So that's one meaning. She's like, I've learned that sort of person I need to avoid. Now, what I would be very encouraged by is if Darcy were to go through the grief process and have more elaborate meanings, more advanced meanings. I don't want to say that. That's terrible, advanced meanings. Meanings that I think would lend itself to future relationships, like, you know what? What I learned from that past relationship after processing all my feelings about Jessie was that I had a little bit to do with why that relationship went the way that it did. And I deserve to look at that and to take care of myself around those kinds of things. That's one of the meanings that I pulled away from that relationship. After grieving, after enough people gave me enough time to vent and get angry at him and all that kind of stuff, that's one of the meanings I pulled away from it. Now, I can't dictate what meanings people should have after a loss by any means, but I would just be a little bit more encouraged by that. So anyway, please, people out there, understand that research has shown that there is no end to grief. Grief is what it is. And it's not uncommon for people to 50 years later be grieving a significant loss in the past, including short-term romantic relationships that were very difficult. I'm guessing if people out there, if you're beyond a certain age, I'm guessing if you really thought about it, you probably are still at least somewhat grieving, if not significantly grieving, multiple relationships that have ended in the past for you, whether it be romantic or friendships, things that you have feelings around. And if you go there in your mind, in your heart, you will have feelings about. Is that mean you have a pathology, that you have a disorder? No, it means you're human. And we need to stop stigmatizing that and stop looking to people in Darcy's position and saying they need to get over it and they need to let go of it. I hope that Darcy has other people to talk to about Jessie, her sister, not her kids, a therapist, her friend, Monique, those kinds of people.
I feel that in my heart that Tom is everything that I want. So I hope, the proposal is the next step. I'm happy with you. I'm ready to experience life with my real man who's absolutely bigger and better.
There's no comparison.
Yeah, there is none.
All right, well, that does it for another episode in which I react to 90 Day Fiancé following Darcy's story. I always have some notes here that I want to cover. As I always say, I can't diagnose from afar. I'm just basing my conclusions on what the producers are showing us, which could be largely fictional in a lot of ways. Also, know that this is not a substitute for therapy because obviously YouTube videos aren't a substitute for therapy. Also, become a patron of the podcast, subscribe, hit the bell below, and comment below. Let me know what you think. It's always good to participate in the conversation. So please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.